Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're sort of pulling back the curtain,
Yeah.
looking at how a few seemingly disconnected news clips can actually reveal this really fascinating interconnected story.
It's all about global power, economics.
And even how it all impacts, your daily life.
Exactly. Connecting those dots. This exploration is going to take you through some really recent insights. I mean, straight from the top,
Highest levels of government expert analysis.
all focused on global energy and, well, geopolitical strategy.
And the source material we've got for this dive, it's pretty rich, quite layered. We've got direct remarks from President Trump. This was aboard Air Force One.
Right. And then there's an in-depth discussion from a news program featuring the energy secretary. So different perspectives.
Definitely. Our aim to unpack these discussions,
Yeah.
really pull out the most important nuggets about, shifting global energy landscapes.
Those critical choke points.
Yeah, and the implications for international stability, sure, but also just for your own understanding of the world.
Okay, so let's dive in.
All right. First up, let's jump right into those presidential perspectives. Geopolitics and energy. Aboard Air Force One, President Trump shared some pretty candid thoughts.
On global relations, alliances,
He talked about wanting a deal with Russia. He even told this story, this anecdote.
about Putin calling him.
Yeah, offering help with Iran. And Trump says he responded, "No, I need help with you," meaning, stopping the Ukraine war.
That's quite a direct line.
Very direct. He mentioned really high casualties, said he heard something like 6,000 to 6,500 soldiers died just last week.
Wow.
And he claimed the war never would have happened if I was president.
Well, what's fascinating there is, the directness of that exchange you described. It really frames his approach to international relations.
How so?
It highlights this highly transactional, very personal style of diplomacy. And then when he was pressed on NATO's Article V,
That mutual defense clause, the core of NATO.
exactly, the cornerstone. He didn't give a straight yes or no on the plane. He emphasized being committed to saving lives and life and safety.
And said he'd give an exact definition later.
Right. Not on the airplane. Which, certainly suggests maybe a nuanced, perhaps conditional view of these established alliances.
That's a really significant detail, especially when you think about international partnerships.
Absolutely.
And beyond global relations, President Trump also touched on domestic stuff. Critiques of the Biden administration.
What does he say there?
He called his predecessor an incompetent president, claimed he hardly ever signed a document, even alleged that other people signed documents for him with the autopin.
The autopin, that machine for signatures.
Yeah. And he also brought up concerns about sleeper cells, said Biden let a lot of super cells in.
Supercell. Did he mean sleeper cells?
It seems so. He specifically mentioned many from Iran and said he hoped they'd be taken care of. Just to be clear for listeners, sleeper cells usually means, covert groups waiting to act.
Right. Those are, serious claims. Border security, potential threats. It touches on that really sensitive area where domestic policy meets national security.
Definitely. And then shifting focus a bit, the president really honed in on oil prices.
Ah, yes, the drill, baby, drill theme.
Exactly. He sounded pretty enthusiastic about it, actually.
He did.
Yeah, expressed real pleasure that oil prices dropped almost $10 yesterday. He attributed it directly to his previous statement telling them to get it down.
So taking credit for the market movement.
Seems like it. His reasoning was that lower energy prices mean, his words, a lot of people aren't able to do things when the energy goes down. Maybe meant are able. And that it leads to a lot less conflict.
Interesting link there between prices and conflict.
He affirmed, "We're drilling like we've never drilled before," and committed to keeping prices down until all these wars are settled.
Okay, so this focus on energy prices, it's not just about, the price at the pump for consumers.
Right.
It's presented as this strategic tool, a lever for global stability aimed at reducing international tensions. And that connects directly, really, to the next big topic.
The Strait of Hormuz. And this is where understanding these global choke points becomes, absolutely vital.
Couldn't agree more.
The Strait of Hormuz. It's a narrow waterway, huge geographic significance, but also vulnerable. Picture this. 104 miles long.
But the key part,
Only 21 miles wide at its narrowest point. It's a real maritime pinch point.
it truly is. And its global importance, it's just massive. It's the transit point for what, 20% of global oil?
20%, that's about 20 million barrels every single day.
The sheer volume, it just makes it incredibly vital for the world's energy supply. You can't overstate it.
Which brings us to the Iranian threats and the international concern around that. Apparently, the Iranian parliament passed a resolution.
To explore closing the Strait of Hormuz, yeah, I saw that.
But crucially, this needs approval from their supreme leader. It's not automatic.
Right, that's a key detail.
So the potential impact, if they ever did close it, well, it would obviously lead to big problems for the world.
Oh, absolutely, and a huge spike in global oil prices, you'd imagine.
But here's where it gets interesting. Connecting this to the bigger picture and the expert analysis.
Go on.
Iran has apparently talked repeatedly about closing the straits. For how long?
For more than 40 years, according to the analysis we looked at. Over 40 years of threats.
But it has never effectively closed.
Never. And there's a really strong pragmatic reason why. Closing it would massively harm Iran itself.
How so?
Well, think about it. All of their oil exports go through the Strait of Hormuz. Every barrel. And it's not just exports. All imports come through there too. Food, goods, everything. It would be like an act of economic self-destruction.
So even with all the threats, the practical reality is it's just not in their own interest to actually block it.
Precisely. I mean, could it cause a mess or trouble? Sure. In the short term, definitely. But the expert view is that the long-term global disruption would actually be small.
Small, with 20% of oil going through. Why small?
Because of this crucial shift. The United States today is the net oil exporter. We, the U.S., don't count in any meaningful way on oil coming out of that strait.
That changes everything, doesn't it?
Fundamentally, it's not just about slightly lower gas prices for you. It completely changes the U.S.'s strategic vulnerability. It gives the U.S. unprecedented leverage, especially in the Middle East, a total departure from how things were for decades.
So that's why oil prices actually dropped, even with Middle East crises flaring up, and why gas and diesel are lower than a year ago.
Exactly. It's seen as a display of American energy dominance. The market sees that the U.S. isn't as vulnerable to that specific choke point anymore.
That's a huge shift, almost under the radar sometimes, but massive implications. And it affects other countries too, right? Who actually does rely heavily on Hormuz?
Great question, because it's not us anymore. Not really. The analysis points out that 84% of the crude oil and liquid natural gas, LNG, going through the strait
84%.
goes to Asia and China.
So Iran closing the strait would mean cutting off their biggest customers.
Precisely. It suggests Iran would be extremely reluctant to alienate these key trading partners. It puts their threats in a very different strategic context.
Okay, that puts a completely different spin on those Iranian threats, which leads us perfectly into the third big area, this idea of American energy dominance.
Right. Let's talk about the progress under that drill baby drill approach.
We've seen, according to the sources, huge growth in drilling for natural gas and production of natural gas. It solidified the U.S. as the world's biggest producer.
And it's not just production for ourselves, it's about exports too. There have been more LNG export approvals.
LNG, liquefied natural gas.
Exactly. And there's huge growth in capacity coming for U.S. exports.
Yeah.
We're building the facilities to ship it out. Plus, domestically, there's this expectation of reshoring of industry.
Bringing manufacturing back to the U.S.
Right. Which will, in turn, consume more of our energy here at home.
So when you add it all up, what does this mean for the total U.S. energy output, its footprint on the world stage?
Well, when you include natural gas liquids along with crude oil, it contributes to over 20 million barrels a day.
Over 20 million, that's massive.
It's over 20% of total global production. And the industry keeps innovating, pushing down break-even prices, making more of it economical to produce. This scale isn't just, an economic footnote. It's a major geopolitical shift.
Okay, so given that huge production capacity, how is the market reacting? We still see instability, right? There's talk of a fragile ceasefire, ongoing conflicts, rockets.
True, the situation remains tense. There are still tragic events like rockets killing people. But the market, it seems to be pricing in confidence.
Confidence in what?
Confidence that American strength, American resolve is ultimately going to lead to more peace in the Middle East. That's the interpretation given.
So despite the bumps, the market sees the U.S. position as stabilizing.
That seems to be the assessment. The expectation is for the U.S. to continue to be a large exporter of oil and by far the largest exporter of natural gas.
And does this translate into global trust? Is the U.S. seen as like a reliable energy anchor now?
The analysis suggests yes, that there's confidence across the planet in President Trump's leadership and in his energy dominance agenda. It's framed not just as economic policy, but as a stabilizing geopolitical force, especially, in such a volatile world.
That's a pretty powerful assessment. Let's pivot slightly to U.S.-China energy trade within this whole picture. President Trump mentioned China.
Right, he said China can continue to purchase oil from Iran.
But he also expressed hope they'd buy plenty from the U.S. too. This is a big change in who's buying what, isn't it?
Oh, it's a fundamental flip. It completely rewrites global energy relationships. If you think back, say, to the President Bush era.
The U.S. was importing huge amounts.
Exactly. The U.S. was the world's biggest importer of oil and natural gas. But today,
China is.
Today, the biggest importer of oil and natural gas is China. And the U.S. is now a net exporter. It's a total reversal.
And the idea is that this trade, China buying U.S. energy, could actually be stabilizing.
Yes, the potential is there. Energy trade, including China potentially taking more U.S. energy exports, could be a great potential stabilizing force. It might even help the trade deal.
So turning a potential point of conflict energy security into maybe a point of cooperation.
That seems to be the hope expressed. It transforms the dynamic.
So this isn't just about today's production, it's about the future too. Are there new technologies, untapped reserves that could keep this energy dominance going?
Yes, definitely. The discussion highlighted next-generation shale technology.
What does that do?
It's designed to enhance the recovery from shale wells, get more oil and gas out of the same rock. It's being called the game changer.
Okay, so squeezing more out of existing fields.
Right, but it's not just shale. The Gulf of the Gulf of America, as it was referred to.
Which was thought to be declining.
Exactly. It was on gentle decline for years, but now it's seeing significant growth in production.
Interesting. And anywhere else?
Alaska, mentioned as having enormous untapped potential.
So putting it all together, this isn't some short-term blip then. It sounds like a really sustained shift.
Not a blip at all, according to this analysis. The projections suggest decades more of U.S. oil production growth in front of us.
Decades more.
It's presented as a structural transformation of the entire global energy landscape, not just a temporary boom.
Wow. That is a truly profound shift. Okay, so let's try to recap our deep dive today. We've really connected those high-level geopolitical statements from the president.
Right, from Air Force One.
Directly to the sort of practical nuts and bolts of global energy. We emphasize the strategic importance of those trick points, like Hormuz.
And how the U.S. relationship to them has changed.
And most importantly, this really impactful and apparently sustained rise of American energy dominance.
And understanding these dynamics, it really gives you a powerful shortcut. Helps you stay well-informed about these incredibly complex forces shaping our world.
Everything from commodity prices to international relations.
To the fundamental balance of global power. It's all interconnected.
So, as we wrap up, here's something to think about, a provocative thought for you. With the United States now firmly established as a net energy exporter and projecting, as we heard, decades more of production growth, what does this fundamental shift in global energy dynamics actually mean for the very definition of international power and influence? Think about how this could reshape alliances, trade deals, maybe even the future of conflict itself. It goes way beyond just focusing on oil prices.
It's about strategic leverage on a global scale.
Yeah.
Definitely something to mull over.